Daniel and Melissa Harper were the picture of perfection. High school sweethearts turned power couple, living in a pristine suburban home with 2 beautiful children and a life envied by all who knew them. But behind their white picket fence and filtered Instagram posts, a sinister truth was taking root, one that would end in betrayal, murder, and a chilling double life no one saw coming. In a charming neighborhood nestled on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, Daniel and Melissa Harper were the golden couple. Their 2-story colonial home stood proudly on a manicured lawn, complete with a white fence and an American flag fluttering from the porch. Every detail of their lives appeared curated for perfection. Daniel drove a luxury SUV and wore expensive suits, always greeting neighbors with a confident smile. Melissa, with her polished appearance and graceful manner, was a local celebrity, of sorts, known for her popular lifestyle blog where she shared parenting tips, home decor ideas, and snippets of her seemingly blissful life. To those watching, theirs was a love story. High school sweethearts who had made it through college, built a prosperous life together, and now raised 2 beautiful children in an idyllic setting. Melissa's Instagram was filled with sunny family outings, Sunday brunches, and heartfelt captions praising her husband's unwavering support. Each photograph felt like a page from a magazine: coordinated outfits, gourmet meals, and warm holiday celebrations. Followers called them goals. Friends referred to them as the perfect pair. But perfect is a word that hides more than it reveals. Behind the front door, the air often felt tense. Neighbors sometimes heard shouting late at night, though it was always dismissed as stress or passionate disagreements. Melissa had recently pulled away from community events she once eagerly hosted. Her posts had grown more distant, and friends noticed she rarely smiled with her eyes anymore. Small things began to unravel. She stopped attending her book club, became hard to reach by phone, and often canceled plans at the last minute. Then, without warning, Melissa disappeared. Daniel told police she had left on an unplanned trip to visit her sister in Oregon. He said she needed time to think and left early in the morning while everyone else was asleep. But the story didn't sit right. Her purse was still in the house. Her phone had been turned off, left on the kitchen counter. Even her dogs, which she treated like children, were still there without extra food or arrangements for care. Melissa's sister, when contacted, said she hadn't spoken to her in weeks and had no idea about any visit. Daniel brushed off concerns, claiming Melissa just needed space and had gone off the grid before. But those who truly knew her said that wasn't her style. Melissa was meticulous, always organized, and never one to leave loose ends. She wouldn't leave her children behind without a word. The community grew uneasy. Candlelight vigils were held. Flyers were posted. Social media turned from admiration to alarm. As days turned into a week, concern deepened. Daniel maintained a calm, almost robotic presence during interviews, repeating the same lines, offering little emotion. He didn't join search parties or answer follow-up questions unless asked directly. Police began to dig deeper, and the cracks in the illusion of the Harpers' perfect marriage started to widen. What had once looked like an ideal life was beginning to look like a carefully constructed mask, and behind it lay a truth far more sinister than anyone could have guessed. As the investigation into Melissa Harper's disappearance unfolded, detectives quickly realized that Daniel's story didn't add up. The claim that Melissa had left in the early morning to visit her sister was riddled with holes. There were no flight reservations under her name, no train tickets purchased, no ride-share history, and her car remained untouched in the driveway. More tellingly, there was no activity on her bank accounts, email, or phone after March 2nd, the last day anyone had seen or heard from her. Surveillance footage from neighbors' doorbell cameras showed her entering the house on the evening of March 2nd, but never leaving. Concern turned to suspicion. Investigators began examining every part of Melissa's life, starting with her digital footprint. On the surface, her social media continued to look perfect. Posts were still being made on her blog and Instagram, but upon closer inspection they were scheduled posts, drafted in advance and auto-published by a content manager. Once those ran out, her accounts fell silent. Police also accessed her private emails and discovered a disturbing trail of messages and draft blog entries that painted a very different picture from the one seen by her followers. Melissa had been planning to leave Daniel. For months, she had documented troubling aspects of their relationship in a private online journal. She detailed how Daniel monitored her phone calls, limited her access to money, and made decisions for the family without consulting her. While he maintained a public image of a supportive husband, in private he was domineering and manipulative. Melissa had confided in a few close friends who later told investigators she had been terrified of what Daniel might do if she ever left him. One friend revealed that Melissa had finally met with a divorce attorney and was making preparations to move out. A search of her personal laptop uncovered an unsent email to her lawyer confirming a meeting on the morning of March 3rd, the day after she was last seen. She never showed up. That same morning, Daniel had called in sick to work, something he rarely did. His calendar showed no appointments or meetings, and his phone remained off for nearly 6 hours. When asked about it, he said he needed rest and had been asleep most of the day. But neighbors reported seeing him in the backyard with gardening tools, which seemed unusual given the freezing temperatures and dormant landscaping. As police dug deeper into Daniel's finances, more red flags emerged. Just weeks before Melissa's disappearance, he had updated her life insurance policy, increasing the payout amount substantially. Records showed he had also applied for a personal loan days after she vanished. He claimed it was for a home improvement project, but no contractors had been hired, and there were no permits filed for any renovations. The more the investigation progressed, the clearer it became that Melissa hadn't simply walked away. She had a plan to leave, and that plan was abruptly and violently stopped. What began as a missing person case was quickly turning into a homicide investigation, and all roads were beginning to lead back to Daniel Harper. With suspicions mounting, investigators obtained a search warrant for the Harper residence. The home, which once appeared in glossy lifestyle blog posts and social media feeds, was now treated as a potential crime scene. Forensics teams moved carefully through each room, photographing, dusting, and cataloging every possible clue. The interior was spotless, too spotless, some noted. There were no signs of a struggle, but there was an eerie sterility to the home, as if something had been wiped clean in a hurry. Cadaver dogs were brought in to search the property. At first nothing seemed out of place. Then one of the dogs began to bark and scratch near the entrance to the basement. The basement itself had recently been renovated, a project Daniel claimed he had taken on during his staycation days. New laminate flooring, fresh drywall, and a faint chemical smell raised further suspicion. When authorities pulled up the newly installed floorboards, their worst fears were confirmed. Beneath the layers of laminate and concrete was a shallow grave. Inside it, wrapped in a heavy plastic tarp and secured with duct tape, was the decomposing body of Melissa Harper. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. An autopsy later revealed She had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and a fractured wrist, likely from trying to defend herself. There were also traces of sedatives in her system, which suggested she may have been drugged before the fatal blow. Her time of death was estimated to be late on the night of March 2nd, just hours after she was last seen alive. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. News vans lined the quiet street, and former admirers of the Harper family now watched in disbelief as crime scene tape cordoned off the picture-perfect home. Daniel, who had maintained his innocence up until that point, was taken into custody. His demeanor, previously calm and controlled, shifted to something colder and more detached. As police reviewed Daniel's recent purchases, the pieces began to fall into place. He had bought cement mix, industrial-strength cleaners, and plastic, sheeting from a local hardware store, all items later used to conceal Melissa's body. Security camera footage showed him making the purchases alone, looking composed and methodical. Detectives also discovered a set of deleted files on Daniel's computer, which forensic specialists were able to recover. Among them were searches for how to hide a body, how long decomposition takes, and the legal implications of a spouse disappearing. It became evident that Melissa's death had been premeditated. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was planned, precise, and chillingly clinical. The man who once smiled in every holiday photo had orchestrated a horrifying act just feet away from where his children slept. The basement, once shown in Melissa's blog as a cozy family retreat, had become the site of her silent burial. The perfect home had turned into a tomb, and the mask Daniel wore for so long had finally crumbled. As the investigation widened, detectives focused on uncovering what had driven Daniel Harper to such a calculated and brutal act. They suspected Melissa's decision to leave was part of it, but the story went even deeper. When police examined Daniel's personal devices more closely, they found a second phone, one not listed in their initial reports. It had been tucked away in a locked drawer in his home office. This device held the missing piece of the puzzle. Inside the phone were months of encrypted text messages, photos, and call logs exchanged with a woman named Claire Bennett, a former college girlfriend. Their relationship had reignited more than 2 years earlier after a chance meeting at a financial conference. Daniel and Claire had been secretly involved ever since. She lived 2 states away and worked as a paralegal. The messages revealed not only a passionate affair, but a long-term plan for a future together. Claire had grown tired of waiting. The messages took on a darker tone in the months before Melissa's death. She often pressured Daniel to make a decision and questioned why he was still with his wife. In one message, she wrote, "If you're serious about us, you know what you need to do." Daniel reassured her that things were in motion and that his life would soon change. When asked about the messages during questioning, Claire admitted she was aware Daniel was married but denied any involvement in Melissa's death. She claimed she never believed he would actually harm his wife. Further evidence surfaced when investigators looked into Daniel's finances. A joint account had been opened under Daniel and Claire's names just 1 week before Melissa disappeared. Into this account, Daniel planned to deposit Melissa's life insurance payout, an amount that had been increased significantly only a month prior. He had listed Claire as his emergency contact on the paperwork. The chilling implication was that Daniel not only intended to start a new life with Claire, but he also saw financial gain in doing so. In addition to the money and affair, detectives also uncovered subtle signs of Daniel's long-standing manipulation. He had isolated Melissa from close friends, controlled most of the finances, and presented himself as the ideal husband to avoid suspicion. He was meticulous, planning each move carefully, confident that the public image he cultivated would protect him from scrutiny. But behind the charm and composure was a man willing to do anything to maintain control and get what he wanted. Although Claire wasn't charged with a crime, her involvement shocked the public. She became a subject of intense media scrutiny, with reporters staking out her home and workplace. She later moved out of state and changed her name. Meanwhile, the full scope of Daniel's deception unraveled in court. His double life, carefully hidden for years, had come crashing down. What seemed like a tragic disappearance had become a deeply disturbing tale of betrayal, greed, and cold-blooded murder fueled by selfish ambition and a secret love affair. The trial of Daniel Harper began 6 months after Melissa's body was discovered. Courtrooms were packed with reporters, members of the community, and Melissa's grieving family. The story had become a national obsession. A beautiful woman, trapped in a false fairy tale, a charming husband hiding a monstrous truth. The once respected financial advisor now sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a wrinkled suit, his face pale and expressionless. Gone was the polished man from social media. In his place was someone unrecognizable, hollow, and emotionless. Prosecutors laid out a meticulous timeline. They presented forensic evidence, including the basement burial site, the chemical traces, and the surveillance footage of Daniel purchasing materials used in the cover-up. The autopsy report confirmed the cause of death and revealed the presence of sedatives in Melissa's system. But the most damning part of the trial came when the jury heard about the second phone and the secret life Daniel had led. Text messages between Daniel and Claire painted a haunting picture. They were filled with fantasies of a life together, free of Melissa and all the complications. Claire's repeated ultimatums and Daniel's promises of imminent change now looked like dangerous motivations. The discovery of the joint account and the updated life insurance policy only solidified the prosecution's theory that Melissa's murder was planned in advance. She had become an obstacle, one Daniel intended to remove permanently. The defense attempted to paint a different story. They argued that Daniel had suffered a mental breakdown, that the murder had not been premeditated but the result of emotional instability and stress. They claimed Melissa had threatened to take the children away and ruin him financially. But this narrative failed to explain the careful cleanup, the lies told to police, the secret affair, and the financial preparations made before Melissa's disappearance. The jury wasn't convinced. Melissa's parents gave emotional statements. Her mother described the anguish of not knowing where her daughter was, of praying that she had simply run away, even though her heart knew otherwise. Her father spoke of watching Melissa grow from a joyful little girl to a loving mother, only to be silenced by someone she once trusted most. The courtroom was silent as they described the lasting trauma and the deep hole Melissa's death had left in their lives. After a 2-week trial and only 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Daniel Harper was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction as the sentence was read. The man who once lived behind smiles and polished shoes had finally been exposed for what he truly was. Melissa's story did not end with her death. It became a symbol, a powerful reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind appearances. Advocacy groups used her case to raise awareness about emotional abuse and control within relationships. The illusion of the perfect marriage had been shattered, revealing a dark and deadly truth that had been hidden behind closed doors for far too long.